Alrighty everyone, hello, and welcome back to another episode of my nonsense. Today we have a topic that honestly I really just wanted to talk about because I feel like it's important when we're talking about common divination methods like tarot to go beyond just the booklet. Before we get into all that though, hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Sara Streisand and I am a Christian witch, content creator, educator, and writer, specifically writer of this book right here, Discovering Christian Witchcraft. Talk about this like every damn episode, but listen, if you said to yourself, Christian witch, what? Then this book pretty much explains the whole thing, from biblical justifications for it and explanations of biblical verses to, you know, some good history with the folk magic and all that kind of stuff, and everything else to kind of just get you started. Give you like a beginner's kit to figuring out Christianity and witchcraft in the same sphere. So check this out if you haven't already. And if you are not yet subscribed, go ahead and do that now because we talk about all kinds of topics like this. Like the video, ring the bell, all that other kind of stuff. And if you are coming back and you've been here before, welcome back and thank you for returning. I would like to invite all of you, though, to check out my Patreon where you can get all of these videos ad-free and 2 weeks early. Especially if you like what I do here and you want to consider doing a little bit more support, that's a great option. But all that said, this is going to be kind of not like a quick video, but definitely one where I really just want to share a little something that I realized not too long ago, which is that actually being like an English major and a fantasy writer did in fact make me a lot better at tarot than I realized it did. Now, don't get me wrong. When it comes to tarot, I absolutely still do use my booklets for tarot cards. I do use like their base meanings, but there's more to it than that, right? So as we're talking about like kind of more advanced techniques for when it comes to reading tarot, this is definitely where I want to start. And if you're hearing any hoopy boobies, I've got a pigeon back there. Bilok! Yes, there he is! Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! Oh no! What? He will do this for hours. Yes! No! I know in the movie. So what I mean when I say that, like, being an English major and also being a fantasy writer of, you know, all kinds of different stuff. I've got a fantasy series out right now if you like enemies to lovers anti-romance, honestly, because it's not your typical book talk romance. The romance is just kind of not the main point. It's all about the world building and the international conflicts within it, but whatever. When it comes to writing fantasy and also, by extension, understanding literary devices that are required to make good fantasy, you're able to also transfer that to seriously interpretive things like tarot. I remember way back when I was 14 and I just started with tarot, I hadn't really developed like any kind of way to figure out what card I was actually being called to pull. And I really just like, I didn't know how to connect the dots between cards, you know? Like, I would get 3 completely different cards from different suits. I would get something like, say, a 3 of wands, a fucking 9 of swords, and like a king of cups, and I would have absolutely no idea what to do with these because like they have completely radically different domains, meanings, and I couldn't make sense of them. But now, you know, as I do much bigger spreads for people, for other people, and for myself, as I kind of learn how to deal with many different cards, especially in like a 9-card reading that just have a bunch of stuff going on at once, I realized that one of the easiest ways to figure out what's going on is to, first of all, step away from the booklet a little bit. Still, yeah, reference it, but step away from the booklet and specifically focus on the imagery of the cards and any kind of symbols that you can connect. So like, right, if we have the 2 of swords, it has a moon on it. If you pull the 2 of swords, which is usually about like, you know, indecision, not being able to figure things out, and you're also pulling like the moon, right? There's a synergy there. There's a connection between the imagery of the cards and just the base of what they mean themselves. I'm looking for shapes that might overlap in the seemingly most innocuous cards, right? So for example, say if you have the 2 of cups and strength, right? Well, Two of Cups has kind of a halo here with some flowers and two skulls looking at each other. Strength likewise has this golden halo behind Strength and is, two skulls gazing at each other, one of which has a more empty, transparent halo. This could signify maybe that, like, there's some kind of relationship here that looks really good, but there's definitely one partner that's domineering the situation, whose fuller halo is kind of eclipsing the other one, or maybe even that one of them is really supportive and one of them is a pillar that the other can kind of draw from. So obviously these are just two cards that would depend on the others. I would go with a more positive outlook on two of them right side up, specifically because, usually that's when they're right side up, they're more positive that way. If this were upside down though, then I would go with that first interpretation of someone is eclipsing the other in a relationship, because now this upside down is all about codependence and all these other kinds of things. Like this is more like that person is a support whose talents can kind of help uplift the other person. Those tiny little minutiae, little nuances, they make a big difference in how you read. And when you are able to kind of zoom out and look at not just the booklet, but the imagery of your card, and notice that some cards that seem unrelated have similar shapes, similar, symbols, like certain flowers, similar gestures or anything. Even just like if you're in a reading and you notice that a person in a card is looking a certain way, looking away from the main card in the reading, looking towards it, if they're holding something up, like this card has a King of Wands holding up a flower, all of these different things, they ask you not just to turn on your witchy brain and like start looking at these cards and all that, but to really think abstractly and turn on your literary analysis brain, to look at these different symbols and their traditional meanings, as well as just the way in which they all connect in the reading. When I started really understanding that a while back, and that like every reading is kind of telling me a story, and that I have to pick out those tiny little details and start connecting these dots in my head in a much more abstract and literary way than just like, based on the traditional themes in a booklet, the readings got way more vivid and way more intense. There are definitely still times where like I don't feel like I have to go that deep, where like the meanings of the cards based on the booklet just are plainly stated enough. And that happens sometimes, but sometimes I'll look at, like, especially again, the more cards, the harder it gets. I'll look at a 9-card reading and I'll say, what the fuck do any of these cards have to do with each other, right? And it's until I sit down and really analyze those little details, just the direction a person's facing, just what they're holding in their hand, how they're outstretched or withdrawn from somebody, that makes all the difference in the world when it comes to how I interpret these. That's really the big one. That's the big tip I got, but there are a couple others, right? So as you might imagine, Marigold Tarot does not have traditional symbolism from the original Rider-Waite-Smith deck, right? Like, we've got Justice holding a fucking spiked mace here with all kinds of flowers hanging around. We have 9 of Coins holding a thorny rose into just like 9 rings, which kind of symbolizes like that harmony, that focus, all that kind of stuff. Ace of Wands is literally just a thorny rose. As you might imagine, not every deck is going to have the same imagery. Some, like say Cat Black's Golden Tarot, use digital collaging to take many different medieval paintings and collage them together into something that looks more like the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith style cards. Whereas others, like Marigold or Weaver Tarot, they get more abstract and more specific to the artist's understanding of the cards. So my next tip, despite the fact that this sounds quite consumerist, is to pick up a couple different decks, right? Don't just like pick them at random, but like when you look at your decks, choose wisely. Look at how they use their art, If there's a pack open, leaf through it really quick and see what the card's art is like. Because if you're getting a bunch of decks that have like essentially the same exact imagery, that doesn't help you that much. If you are getting instead cards that have radically different imagery, and also, bonus, radically different interpretations in the little booklet that usually comes with them, that helps you get a much broader understanding of a card, right? So sometimes people will see like 10 of Swords and they'll be like, oh no, because traditionally 10 of Swords is a really shit card. I mean, You see it. She's not cute. She's not, that's, typically not a good sign. But different cards with different imagery and also different meanings help you look at it in different ways, right? Like, yeah, this is bad. Like, this is a terrible situation. But when you're at this point, generally you're at rock bottom. So like the silver lining is like it really can't get worse. And that's why I actually like when I see the Ten of Swords, because I'm like, oh cool, so everything has been sucking, but like this is kind of like the ceiling of suckery. That's great, so it helps you look at things a little bit differently. And honestly, like another thing that bears keeping in mind about tarot is that it's not bulletproof, right? This is, like anything else, it's a language, and it's not really anyone's first language, right? So it's, unless you get really good at direct meditation, which is kind of the first language of many of the entities you might be talking to, this is kind of like a second language to all of us, and the spirits you're talking to know how to use it really well, but for us who are still learning this tool, and will always be learning this tool, it gets very difficult sometimes to get the minutia, and also very difficult to catch onto the differences in the way spirits talk, right? Some, I've noticed, especially Christian spirits, they don't really give a shit about like what the cards mean. They really don't care about that so much. They prefer to just directly point out the imagery, which is where this literary analysis tip came in real big handy, because a lot of the friggin' meanings had nothing to do with each other, but the imagery was so stark and undeniably linked that it's like, okay, so I'll just put the booklet aside because clearly you're saying something else entirely right now. Whereas other spirits, if you say, here you go, this is what we're using, they'll be like, okay, I'll do my best with this, right? And they'll try to make things that make sense. And sometimes they make just seamless sense with the booklet descriptions. So you have to kind of figure out like how your spirit in question is trying to use the cards. Which, side note, is a big thing. A lot of people, they ask the tarot deck these questions. They ask, like, as if the deck is any kind of autonomous intelligence. And that, to me, is a big faux pas, because, like, in my mind, a deck is just a tool. Like, that, to me, that's the same as, like, just asking the absolute void on Messenger or something, like, what their thoughts are. Or asking like Siri or Alexa or even ChatGPT. This is not like a sentient creature. This is in effect like any other kind of robo AI assistant, in that it can maybe spit out something that sounds interesting by itself. It maybe has its own like little vibe to it and its own like pre-programmed understanding of itself. But this is like a phone. If you pick this up, who's answering you on the other side of the phone? You're not just talking into the receiver, So when you're using any kind of divination tool, make sure you know that it's not the tool that's telling you things. It's some spirit behind the box that is coming up to answer you. And if you don't know exactly like who you're asking to come sit to the table, you may as well be using a fucking Ouija board at that point. You may as well just be saying like, oh yeah, hello, anyone who's got the energy to like influence my pick of the cards, come on over and just start directing my hand. Not a good idea. Not a great idea. For obvious reasons, I would hope. And when it comes to reading styles, I will say that like everyone has a different thing. I've developed my own ways to intuitively tell when it's time to pick a card. I will get kind of like hit with like a ping in my ear. Like, I'll get that kind of like sharp feeling, or really like heavy, just like heavy kind of presence feeling, or really like urgent feeling, like this card. And it's like, okay, like I'll touch each card, and when I get some kind of reaction, I'll be like, okay. Other people, they just shuffle until a card pops out, or they shuffle, 7 times exactly, and then pick up the first card. It's however works for you, and however you and your spirits have gotten used to doing that this will make sense. So there's not really anything for me to say about that, because everyone's different. But on the whole, if you remember nothing else about this, I want you to know these 3 things. That a tarot card deck is much more than just its booklet descriptions. That the imagery that is chosen by the artist is very important, and if you know how to like analyze books for literary devices and themes and stuff like that, you're gonna have a way better time here, right? So unfortunately, anyone who sat there in English class saying maybe the curtains are just blue, get fucked. You're gonna wish you learned those skills if you want to get somewhere real good at these. It's good to have various really different decks for the sake of cross-referencing like that. And also, it's going to be really, really good if you actually get specific in who you're trying to talk to, so that you know that, you know, you're not getting some little asshole spirit just jerking you around, and also so that you can learn the difference in communication styles between different categories of spirit. Saints, Christian spirits, right? Like angels. And angels really like to just pick one card and then just go off in your brain. Like the card is almost just an anchoring point for, or a central theme of this entire shit they're about to dump in your head. Christian saints really like to just use the imagery itself. Jesus himself, also like the angels, likes to just kind of drop one card and just go off in the wind and drag you into the mind palace. Demons, I notice, get a little bit more, traditional with the cards. They pull cards that either tell you a story a little bit in their imagery and also in the meanings, or they go more strictly with the meanings. And many other kinds of spirits, they're going to pick specific decks, especially as I do my Where the Gods Left Off, When Angels and Demons Collude type readings. They pick the certain deck they do for a reason, because the decks they pick have a specific language they're looking for, especially in the booklet. I've been blown away sometimes picking certain decks and then seeing how insanely specific the booklet language was to the question that I asked. They know what they're doing before they pick the deck. All I hope that you take away is that you don't have to be, like, I still use the booklets too. I always use the booklets to, like, kind of cross-reference and double-check myself and try to figure out how the traditional meanings reflect anything that I've gleaned from the themes. But when we're coming to read tarot, once you get a really good grasp of, like, what a card typically means on its own, because you've seen it, like, 1,002 times, go beyond those meanings. Look for those little details in all of your spreads. Look at how in any spread you do, the cards interact with each other. Who's facing who has a sword race to who versus who is like slumped away from someone. Look at who has like flowers around them versus like, any kind of dangerous swords or anything else like that. Look at who is clearly in anguish versus who seems very happy and upbeat. All these different kinds of things. Look at all these things in tandem. Look at how the shapes in the reading, right? In a 9-card reading, maybe it's going like snake style down like this. Maybe you're seeing a triangle of cards that is being influenced by stuff around and within. Maybe you are seeing one side of the aisle looking very different from the other side as if they are fighting, right? I've even seen a spread where one time someone asked if they should trust somebody, and in that 9-card spread, an entirely disruptive and brutal set of cards looked literally like it was hooking in and breaking apart the other line of cards, right? It was a 6-card reading, and there were, 1, 2, and then 3 here was getting interrupted by a hook here. And those hooked cards suggested someone who was a liar, a cheat, someone who was very manipulative and out for their own gain. And that told me all I needed to know, because that looked like that person in question's energy just interrupting the intuitive flow of the querent. So sometimes people ask me when I do my readings, like, oh, is this a past, present, future? No. Nope. I have no idea. The spread is different every time because I don't use spreads like that. I don't use those kinds of things. I simply pull the cards and I see what kind of story they're trying to tell me, and I see how everything connects and what the shape of it all is. And the only way you can really get to that point, I think, is just by doing it. Lots of people ask me, Sarah, like, what books do you read for tarot? Which I am reading, like, Christian meditations on the tarot, like Christian Hermeticism. This one right here, I can't remember exactly what it's called. And it's intense. It's like hundreds of pages long, because it's like tons and tons of pages on each major arcana. It's crazy. But sure, you can read books until your hands fall off and your eyeballs fall out, but it's really just doing it over and over again, getting used to seeing the same cards over and over again, that you start remembering those themes and that you start really locking them in here. So I've been doing this for so long that any card that I pick up, I could tell you pretty much what it means without having to consult the booklet at all. because I've read the descriptions enough. There's no tips on how to do that. That's just practice. Unless you want to treat it like flashcards and, you know, you want to like memorize them that way. But otherwise, just showing up and doing readings out every now and then, that'll give you a good idea too. So think about it. If you want to get better at tarot, you best get reading them fiction books. You best get writing down all these themes and asking yourself, what does this mean? What does this represent? What does this entail? What culturally are these things connected to? You know, what is the traditional symbolism of the color blue? Why would it be used here? Why would it be, you know, referencing? What could it be referencing? What do stars mean? What does a coin mean? What do cups represent? What does water do? All these different things, they have their place in any interpretive field like tarot or anything else. And it just makes reading so much more fun. So much more fun, whether you're reading tarot or a fiction book. So keep all that in mind. Just wanted to drop that on you, and I'll see you next time. See ya.